Hi, I'm Bertrand Maltaverne from the Hackett group, one of the analysts in the team. And today I'm really pleased to have two guests for this podcast. We have Tom. Tom is head of Procurement System at Rolls-Royce. And you, Dan, you're a global solution consulting head for Pactum. And interestingly, I guess we'll talk about it during the conversation, but you currently work at Pactum and basically worked at Rolls-Royce before, so you know the place. Nice having you there, both of you guys. We're going to be talking about AI, probably, tech, probably, but also a lot of stuff around it, like looking at Rolls-Royce, the innovation journey, what you learn both on the Rolls-Royce side, the practitioners, the provider side of things, around what it takes to implement tech like AI-enabled tech, and we'll talk about what's coming next for both Rolls-Royce and Pactum. So maybe I'll start with you, Tom, by describing maybe the journey that Rolls-Royce is basically going through, what's motivated the start, struggles, challenges in between, and where you are right now.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a really exciting time to be part of Rolls-Royce, and journey is the right word, I think. We've been through a significant transformation of the organisation, not just procurement, in the last 18 months. But that's brought with it loads of opportunity. Procurement's got an exciting seat at the table, but that comes with quite a lot of attention. And then I guess my role within that is the digital transformation of the procurement function.
So you're freaking out people out and saying, yeah, we're going to put AI all over the place, robots, that kind of stuff?
We're trying not to freak people out too much, but it's happening.
We'll go on that.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of what we've got at the minute, we've got a relatively immature stack. Because of the transformation, we brought together 4 different businesses into one group procurement, and so our stack is a bit fragmented. We've got source to pay suites. Suites is a plural there, and that's probably reflective of where the tech market was a few years ago, and we've not really invested in procurement technology, bar Pactum, in the last 3 to 4 years, other than those suites. So we've got a waterline to bring up. We're trying to bring up the benchmark, the foundations of procurement and technology. But as you say, there are challenges around that. With a historic company, a pretty well-established workforce, a significant workforce. So bringing in technology in that space can be a challenge.
We'll go on that, but maybe before you talk about the tech stack you have with different tools with a big S at the end. Suites with an S at the end, I don't think it's very unusual, actually. But then what was the trigger to add one more in there, like Pactum, actually?
I guess it was, partly that drive to do something different. The procurement function's being asked to do more and more and more and more and more with the same people. And so, one way to enable that is through technology. And I guess we'll probably come on to the specific use cases with Dan in a bit more detail, but it was around what are the things that we're not doing today? How can we use technology to address some of the things that we can't get to, that we don't have time to, or that we're perhaps not doing in a very structured or a very standardized way?
Yeah, okay. And like you started to hint at the culture of the company, so different companies have different culture. How would you qualify the culture of Rolls-Royce, and how that aspect was super important to take into account into the transformation and implementation?
I think we probably underestimated the impact of that. Just because of the nature of the company. We're an engineering company, we work with defence customers, so we are very protective and sensitive about where our data goes, who's seeing our data, how far-reaching it is. So when it comes to the topics of AI, that can be a real challenge. And then, as I say, we've got a really well-established workforce as well. So that there is a bit around the change journey of how you bring people on that. How do you sell something as an enabler for them rather than a threat to them? I guess we're trying to change the culture. Actually, that's one of our overall digital strategy. One of the biggest aspects of it is the digital culture, as opposed to here's the next new shiny thing.
Yeah.
It's more about changing the culture.
And that's interesting because then now you work for Pactum, but you worked at Rolls-Royce, I guess maybe together or something.
Yeah, we had about 2 years together, but I was at Rolls-Royce for 10 years. The first 10 years of my career, I was at Rolls-Royce.
So you've seen it from the inside. You were an insider, leading some implementation, as I said earlier. and you leave the implementation of Pactum from the outside, let's say. So what's your reflection on what happened in the past, implementing like one of these suite and implementing Pactum? What did you do differently, etc., knowing the culture and everything?
What I did previously was part of a team. I led the team to implement one of the source-to-pay suites. And the first major difference, the easiest difference to call out, is just the time. The source-to-pay implementation, as they all do, took, at Rolls-Royce to roll out globally, I think it was an 18-month program we worked on. So you've got 18 months to onboard people, to bring awareness, to help with some digital literacy, which is something we'll come on to, but for a lot of them it was the first time they'd started to see new cloud-based tools. I think it was one of the first ones we brought into Rolls-Royce. So you've got a long time to educate people, to use different methods to educate, and so we had that opportunity, and I think we used it reasonably well. You can always make improvements in that time frame. But with Pactum, one of the blessings, which can also, if you're not aware of it, become a curse, is that it's much shorter to implement. It's designed, it's more of a modern technology. They've designed, lots of the providers here at DPW are very much designed to be short implementations. And so that means that you have less time to focus on the change before you get live. And I think I've seen it at Rolls firsthand, working with Tom and other customers as well. Sometimes, historically, we've been used to doing change as part of the implementation, and then you get live and it's done. And actually, with newer providers, you'll get live much quicker than you've had chance to do any change. And change is not a thing that happens; it's an ongoing journey. And I think that's one of the biggest differences I've seen. Tom referenced it as well, but I think with the difference with some of the AI solutions like ourselves versus some of the source-to-pay suites, they're tools for humans to do the same thing that they were doing, just in a more pleasant, maybe slightly quicker way, with a few of the really awkward steps automated. Whereas with some of our tools, there's a genuine feeling of, this is work I was doing that's now being taken away, and that enables you to do more, but if that's not managed properly and educated properly, then that becomes a challenge as well. So that's something we've worked closely on.
And on your side, so on the Rolls-Royce side of things, knowing the culture around, risk aversion, like any procurement organization, I would say, is to some extent risk averse. There could be some difference from one industry to the other, between the public sector, the private sector, but I would say, then that's why I said freaking out people. It's like when people see AI, they see the robots and stuff. And I remember it was the same, like, I used to work for a large company 20-something years ago, implementing an e-sourcing solution before AI, before all of that, and that's the first thing people said, it's to replace us, etc., etc. So that fear is already there, it's always there, and I think it's growing. So there is that aspect of the fear, but also Rolls-Royce as a culture, as you said, engineering, high quality standards, being very cautious about, quality, I would say, and what people hear, it's around AI, hallucinations, and all of that thing. So how did you manage that internally to address this fear and taking back on the culture and move back to me?
So I think the original use case that we had was very much touching the tail spend that no one was touching. We didn't have time to touch it, and we perhaps somewhat naively thought, well, we'll just plug in this great solution and it'll work, and the savings will start rolling in, and we'll all just sit here very happy and move on to the next thing. As I say, very naively thought that was the case, and both of us, I think, worked really closely to figure out, why is this not working for us? Pactum were looking at it in comparison with their other customers and saying, you're not hitting the numbers, and we're not hitting the numbers, why is this not happening? And I think what we realised, we had to take people on that journey of, again, this is here to support you, this is here to be part of the way that you hit your objectives. So, one part of the organisation that we tried to embed the use of Pactum into, it was very much felt like, well, that was going to take away the opportunity of the savings that these people were responsible for. And we were saying, well, look, any savings you get through Pactum, that's the same saving. It's just going to allow you to do more negotiations now. So it was just trying to kind of, I guess, take people on that journey. I think the other thing that we're starting to see now as well, because we're heavily regulated, because we have defence customers, there was a nervousness around, well, surely our defence customers aren't going to like us using AI and using it for negotiation. They love it. It's the opposite, because they're going, we can see the full audit trail of the negotiation. We can see every conversation. Whereas something that, for a person to do, they're having to write down what the negotiation was, each step, and sometimes it's really hard to document and it's an afterthought.
It's there, it's doing it in the background actually.
Yeah, so we've again found a way to sell this as an opportunity that now you don't have to write all that stuff down. This is there to do this for you.
I think one thing worth adding to that as well, Tom, is that you guys, that was one of the first things that we started to go, right, okay, let's work together on how we change stuff, because I think some of the team acknowledged that there was a challenge in defence and maybe Pactum could help, and when we actually got together with the right people and got into a bit more detail than just here's the kind of top line layer of here's what Pactum can do, it's like, okay, now we understand what it can do. Could we fit it in here? And if we work together, could we make it super auditable? So actually for the defence customers it works really well, and you guys did a great job of leaning into that and sort of guiding us on okay, these are the things that would make it really help us with our defence customers, and that makes us want to lean back in, because then that auditability is not just something people with defence customers want, but lots of Pactum customers want. So it was I think a great thing that you guys have found opportunity to do, but it took us diving deeper into something together versus just, like I say, at the beginning we sort of stayed at this, well, here's Pactum's broad general capability of negotiating, let's plug it into this area and negotiate, and actually going, where do we run negotiations where we want to put a bit more effort and a bit more focus, and then bringing us in and working together on that, as opposed to trying to just solve it in isolation. Either of us worked really well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you say, well, both actually, you used the work together, and I think there was a lot of influence, discussion, collaboration. Would you say that, so I don't know who wants to take the question, actually maybe both, because you worked at Rolls-Royce and you were on the provider side, but how do you rate the collaboration, the relationship between the buying organization, so you, Rolls-Royce, and the provider and the service provider, the technology provider? How important was that in terms of success factor? I know you knew the house, you were there, so that gives you a benefit, but in general, how important is that, you think?
I'll go first. So for me, it was critical, because as Tom said, it wasn't. I worked for Pactum, but I want to be clear. Like when we first got live with Pactum, it was kind of, oh, it's live, and we're looking at it going, this isn't working like we want it to work. Let's get together and figure it out. Obviously, it certainly helped that I had some understanding, but I've not been there for 7 years. It's everything's changed, everything's still the same kind of scenario. But for me, it was that connection, or that working together and collaborating on finding the opportunities was absolutely key. I think Tom and Tom's team, Dan and Michael and others, have really lent into innovating with us, collaborating with us, helping, and not just saying we want this feature or this function, but here is the problem, here's the situation, how do you solve it? And because we'll know better what Pactum can do and what we could develop quickly and how we could solve it in a certain way. So that's been a key part of it. I think, as always, there's the challenge for some tech providers. We'd love everyone to run at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but I think that's helped. The key thing that's helped with me knowing the house is I've been able to help with sometimes they can't always run quite as fast as we would like, but I've got to be fair to Tom and the team, they've done a good job of running pretty fast, which has been good. But that's our view from Pactum. Obviously we're sat here together today, which is testament to that and the pedigree of Tom's team.
Yeah, maybe I can tag in there. So it's exactly that. I think Dan bringing his experience of the company probably helped with that, grease in the wheels. But it was very much, we're now into sharing roadmaps. We're talking about the capability that we want for our function, the outcomes that we want, and we're not just talking about let's go and plug in the new shiny tool, because there's hundreds of them. And you've got to be focused on what are we trying to solve for here. And I think that human aspect of it, Dan coming and spending time on site with the people that we want to use, that's invaluable. And I can't stress enough how much the collaboration is probably the only reason it's now worked and we haven't pulled the plug. There was a point when we were looking at, is this the right thing to do? And through that hard work, through that collaboration, through the change management, we've made it work, and now we're seeing the results, in the bottom line.
Where are those points that were raising those warnings and raised the question, do we continue or not? What was it about?
I guess, as I said at the start, it was the naivety that we're just going to get a return on investment.
So the financial thing? Financial
was the predominant driver. As I say, we haven't maybe invested in digital procurement very much in the last few years, and this was we've got an absolute stone cold business case here. no doubt that this is gonna land. And then sort of 3-6 months in, you were kind of looking at each other going, oh, what's happening here? We thought this was nailed on. We're looking internally at each other going, is it us? And so yeah, it was very much financially driven. I think that's certainly the early part of the relationship. That is where we focused around Pactum, because it has a more tangible business benefit than perhaps some of the others, which are more difficult to measure when it comes to things like efficiency or enablement.
Hard savings are always good to have.
Exactly. So that this was like, if we can't prove it with Pactum, or if we can't prove it with an autonomous negotiator, what can we prove it on? And we're not going to build our credibility internally, so we had to get this right.
It's again another blessing and a curse for us. Is like one of the things we can hang our hat on is tangible savings. So in the early days, if the first number in our dashboard is here's the amount we've saved you, and if that number's not where we want it to be, then we need to work with customers to figure out how we get that to be the case, which is where Tom's team lent in. And we say some of the things we then did, looked at other use cases, looked at other scenarios, other teams, helped us go more globally in spend, just to get the more traction, more process, more spend through the platform. So it was good, and we're glad they didn't tap out.
And so that story I think is super important, because every organization needs to have a business case, have savings, and to get the funding, and then also to judge if things are working the way they were supposed to work, and have the feeling that thing you struggled, then you worked on it together, etc., and that opened doors for more. So let's look a bit like the next steps in terms of, for Rolls-Royce, I have the feeling that success is potentially opening doors for new digital stuff. So my question for you, Tom, is like, what's next for Rolls-Royce? So within Pactum, in terms of maybe use cases or potential, or maybe looking beyond that scope, how does the future look like?
Yeah, so there's definitely aspects of both. So it has opened doors. I think it's built up that credibility that, look, we kind of do know what we're talking about when it comes to the technology market, and we can deliver on our savings, and so maybe trust us a little bit more with some more investment. So that's really positive. In terms of what we're looking to do, as I said before, we aren't necessarily going, I want to go and buy that tool and that tool and that tool. We're saying, right, what are the next challenges that we want to solve for, and then assess the market. So we're looking at all sorts of capability, whether it's supply chain risk management, whether it's visibility, whether it is how do we extract more out of our contracts. But as Dan's alluded to as well, we're also looking at how that fits in with Pactum's roadmap, and how can we work on that together, because we're already embedded and we don't need to then necessarily implement another tool, and because we can work together on it. It's how does that capability that we're looking for fit in with Pactum's roadmap and find the kind of joint objectives.
And so, Dan, so from the provider side of things, your success with Rolls-Royce, everything we heard, the potential discussion you had, and not divulging the roadmap and stuff here, but what's the future looking like? So Pactum with Rolls-Royce, and more broadly, what's coming?
There's two parts to it. One is, how do we get better at negotiations? How do we understand more of the context of Rolls-Royce and other customers, and get better and deeper at negotiations and be able to take in more opportunity? And then the other part becomes, how do we help with the things that tangentially touch negotiations? So how do we go one step further upstream and start to understand, okay, what are the inputs? Can we that will help us do better and get more value for you, but also if we can help with some automation there, then whilst we're there, let's do that. And similarly, on the other side of negotiations on conclusion, how do we help smooth the downstream process? So as Tom's mentioned, what we are doing, the way we do everything at Pactum, is we certainly have a vision and a clarity of where we want to go, but we want to talk to different customers that we're working with to help identify, okay, we think that's valuable, but is it valuable, or are you guys solving this in an entirely different way? And those conversations with Rolls have helped no end with us prioritizing, actually we want to go a little bit deeper, a little bit earlier into the process, so we can find better opportunities and help you with some data cleansing on the back end, so you've got more visibility when you come to whatever tool that is that's looking at later. Maybe
if I could just add to that, again, because we've kind of proved the business case, it's actually given us a bit more runway. We've now got a longer term relationship. We've now looked at an additional module, so it's given us a bit more runway to go, okay, we're now getting the business case benefits, the tangible benefits. How do we look at maybe some of the efficiency benefits that we can get from the process? How do we free up more time for people to think about the stuff that they should be thinking about, the strategic stuff, thinking about the challenging things, as opposed to the the task.
And I guess people are also more receptive because usually the first step is the most difficult one. So once you have a positive outcome, then you're ready to take the second one and third one.
Becomes easier to sell. So again, we've probably predominantly focused in the indirect procurement space. We're now saying, well, look, we've proved it over here. How do we go and use the same technology, the same techniques, the same changes in the direct space?
Yeah, it's exciting times. So we're close to the end. So maybe, I don't know, we'll put you on the spot maybe, but like looking back, what's the one thing you would have the audience know in terms of, like, I don't know, best practice tip or thing they should be doing if they want to be as successful as what you've been doing with Rolls-Royce?
Collaboration, absolutely collaboration. Working in partnership, finding those sweet spots where you can work together, where your roadmaps align. Being really clear on those outcomes. Don't just buy tech for tech's sake. It's really tempting to do. There's so much great stuff out there, but be really clear on what you're aiming for, and then be sure on the business case. And the reason why we nearly did back out of it was because we were also not scared to fail.
Yep.
And I think you've got to be quite brave in that we were okay that if we ended this relationship, we were doing it for the right reasons.
Aside from obviously talking to Pactum, this was key. Of course, that one.
And coming to DPW.
Yeah, DPW is another good one. But for me, the thing that, outside of all of that, with my background and things, I think one big thing that folks here at DPW, probably the folks listening to this, need to know or understand is digital literacy of the folks that aren't at this conference, that are in procurement, who I've had conversations with people in procurement about what a large language model is, which to, I guess, most people, if not everybody here, it's probably understandable quite quickly. Some people have no idea. And knowing that there's that huge spectrum across procurement of levels of digital literacy, it's on tech providers, it's on people like Tom and Tom's function, it's on this conference, it's on people like yourself, to help educate and provide that material. And I think the only way procurement will adopt technology properly to the future is if everybody has some level of digital literacy, which isn't a given.
Challenge yourself, learn, discover, and I think there is no better way to close for our discussion. So Dan, Tom, thanks again for this time and for sharing this success story, I would say. And yeah, it's always been a pleasure having that conversation with you guys, and thank you.
Thank you.